Hello everyone, thanks for coming back. This video I'm going to be ranking the Beatles albums from, I don't want to say worst because none of them are bad at all. They're all amazing. Maybe my least favorite to my absolute favorite slash one I think is the best. Number one, it's hard to choose number one. And for this instance, I'm going to go which one I think is their best work. But again, this is the British version of the Beatles albums. They were released differently in the United States and as they were in Britain. These are the albums originally the way they were recorded in the studio. The ones in America were a lot of compilations, and all these are on CD because I don't own any of the British stuff on vinyl. So I'm gonna get started with the bottom of my list, and like I said, none of these are bad. They're all amazing, and it's the Yellow Submarine soundtrack. The only reason it's on the bottom is it has some songs that were released before, like All You Need Is Love, and of course the title track, Yellow Submarine. But the second side is Orchestration by George Martin, which I actually enjoy. I can listen to it. But all in all, it's only, 4 new songs, 2 rehashed songs. But the songs on here are amazing. Only a Northern Song, All Together Now, Hey Bulldog, which is, it's really heavy. And It's All Too Much, one of George Harrison's songs. And ends with All You Need Is Love before you go to the second side, or all on one side on the CD, which is Orchestrations from the film. Next up is the second album the Beatles released in Britain. It's With the Beatles. Sorry about the glare. With the Beatles has the same artwork as the American version of Meet the Beatles. It's a lot of covers, a lot of Motown covers, but also a lot of originals from Lennon and McCartney. It's got All My Loving on there, Don't Bother Me, which was George Harrison's first song that he wrote that made an album. Till There Was You was a cover. Please Mr. Postman, that's one of the Motown covers. But we got covers of Chuck Berry. I Want to Be Your Man, Money, that's what I want. It's a strong album. I always liked it, but like I said, there's too many covers on it, so. Next up is it's not really a soundtrack. It is A Hard Day's Night. They released a movie called A Hard Day's Night, but this is not the soundtrack from it. This is actually a studio album. And the first 7 songs are featured in the movie, which I believe would have been the first side, and then the next 6 songs are all originals. Some great songs on here, of course, the title track, Hard Day's Night, I Should Have Known Better, and I Love Her, which is amazing. Kurt Cobain actually does a cover of that. Can't Buy Me Love, which is a huge hit, obviously. Anytime at All, I love that song. You Can't Do That, I'll Be Back. I feel like the last couple songs, like I'll Cry Instead, Things We Said Today, When I Get Home, You Can't Do That, and I'll Be Back, aren't that well known in the Beatles catalog, but they're amazing songs. But that album's not as strong ending as it is in the beginning. Next up is a soundtrack from the film Magical Mystery Tour. Very psychedelic artwork. This was released in 1967, late 67. Features the songs Magical Mystery Tour, The Fool on the Hill, Flying Blue Jay Way, Your Mother Should Know, and I'm the Walrus, which were all featured in the movie. And then at the time, these other songs were just featured as singles, on 45 RPMs. Hello, Goodbye, Strawberry Fields Forever, Penny Lane, Baby You're a Rich Man, and ends with All You Need Is Love. So basically, this looks like a greatest hits album to me, except for maybe Flying and Blue Jay Way. Every other song is very famous, still played on the radio by the Beatles. And the good thing about the Beatles is I feel like you can throw on any Beatles album and it sounds like a greatest hits. There's an amazing song every album. You don't really have to skip through it. It's kind of hard to just pick one song from each album to listen to because you just push play and they just go. Next up is their debut album, Please Please Me. I like this album. It's pretty cool. I feel like it's very 50s rock and roll sounding. Again, there's a lot of covers on there, but it opens up with the high energy. I Saw Her Standing There. Couple hit covers. Chains, which is a Carole King song. Boys, which is Ringo's singing debut. Features the hit, obviously, Love Me Do and Please Please Me. But then there's some great early Lennon McCartney compositions, like Do You Want to Know a Secret? There's a Place, Ask Me Why, and ends with Twist and Shout, which was obviously famous, but then, it's in Ferris Bueller when he lip syncs it in the parade, which really blew it up. Next up is an album I always liked. I always loved the artwork. Very strong for a early Beatles album, and I definitely feel like this is where you can see the direction they were going from pop artist to rock artist, and this is Beatles for Sale. Um, yeah, there's a cover on here, Chuck Berry's Rock and Roll Music, also Mr. Moonlight, Kansas City / Hey Hey Hey. Words of Love is a Buddy Holly song. Honey Don't, Carl Perkins song that Ringo sings. But yeah, this is great. And again, it opens up with No Reply, which is amazing. I'll Follow the Sun, which is a great Paul McCartney composition that was double tracked by him. Also, some other favorite songs on here. I Don't Want to Spoil the Party, which has John and Paul singing together. What You're Doing is Paul solo. And another Carl Perkins covers is Everybody's Trying to Be My Baby to End It, that George Harrison sings. Very strong album. Love that album. Next up is, I guess it is another kind of soundtrack. It is Let It Be, the final release from the Beatles, but not the final album. Let It Be was a kind of in studio film that the Beatles were creating to pretty much a filming of them making an album, but it kind of fell through. There was a lot of infighting within the band. This time the guys were going off trying to do their own solo project. There's obviously the huge song Let It Be, Get Back, The Long and Winding Road, and Across the Universe. But there's also like short songs which are less than a minute, like Dig It, Maggie May, and another amazing song is For You Blue. But yeah, this I just feel like that cover art, this picture just signified the end of the Beatles for me. Next up is, I feel like, the album that really catapulted the Beatles to their mid to late 60s stardom, and just the amazing band they became. Like, they could have gotten better than they actually did. This is Help. Again, this is not really the soundtrack. The film did look the same as this, but the soundtrack was released in America. This is the album. Every song on here is amazing. It opens up with Help. The Night Before, You've Gotta Hide Your Love Away, the great acoustic Lennon song that Eddie Vedder covers, and just great. Need You, Another Girl, You're Gonna Lose That Girl. Ticket to Ride, another huge single from this. Act Naturally was a Ringo song. It's Only Love, one of my favorite songs of all time. You Like Me Too Much is great. Tell Me What You See, and then it runs into I've Just Seen a Face and Yesterday. Two great, amazing Paul McCartney recordings. And the funny thing about Paul McCartney is he actually is a guitarist first, but he played bass in the Beatles. But there was a lot of songs like Yesterday, Blackbird, I've Just Seen a Face that he wrote on guitar, because George Harrison was just so great, and John Lennon was a great songwriter and guitar. Paul just on his own switched to bass. So that's why you see Paul plays guitar really pretty much when you see him live. With Wings, he played guitar, but he did play bass also. But when you see him live and do the Beatles song, he does pick up the bass. And what band do you know that has four amazing artists that can all sing, all can have hit songs? I mean, I think the only other band that really did that with all four members singing, I'm talking actual musician bands. I'm sure there's a lot, but the other one that comes to mind is Kiss. And Ace Frehley's voice wasn't that strong, although I do love his solo album, of all the solo albums they put out. All right, back to the Beatles. Next up is these next 5 albums. It was kind of hard to pick number 1, so I'm just going with the ranking. It could be how many times I've listened to it. Maybe I listened to them too much. But next up is Revolver. Opens up with the amazing George Harrison composition, Taxman. Eleanor Rigby, another composition by Paul McCartney that they actually have orchestration on, a huge hit. I'm Only Sleeping, great John Lennon song. The very psychedelic Love You Too, which George Harrison uses a sitar on. And then, in my opinion, one of the greatest vocal performances of all time, Here, There, and Everywhere. And after that is the song Yellow Submarine, of course, sang by Ringo. In my in my opinion, Yellow Submarine may be one of the weakest songs, even though it's one of the most popular from the Beatles. And that's the end of this side ends with She Said. She Said um, opens up the second side with Good Day Sunshine and Your Bird Could Sing, which is a great Lennon song. Yeah, it's great. Got to Get You Into My Life is another huge hit. And then Tomorrow Never Knows, which actually has, it's got the sitar on it again. But this is where the Beatles started really experimenting in the studio. I Love You Too was the first song that had like a backwards guitar solo on it. The same thing with Tomorrow Never Knows. The guitar solos and riffs are backwards. The tapes play backwards. Excuse me. All right, next up is this album's kind of funny because this album was put out as a response to Bob Dylan. They kind of wanted to rival Bob Dylan because it's at the time, Bob Dylan was one of the most influential artists of all time in the world. And I feel like this is when the Beatles became an album band. This is the first one where they became a studio band rather than Beatlemania. And it's Rubber Soul, one of my all-time favorite albums. I just love the artwork. It's so simple yet so psychedelic and just fits the times. I mean, the lettering. And funny thing is, they took a picture, and as they were trying to make the artwork for the cover, it kind of just slid back on the projector, and Paul McCartney just said, "Stop, that's it, right there." That's kind of looks like it's kind of the lens is leaning back on their faces. Amazing album. And this was the last um, album released in Britain that had different track listing than in America. And I like this version much better than the American version. Opens up with Drive My Car, and Norwegian Wood is the next song. This Bird Has Flown, which is the first song George Harrison used a sitar on. And he was actually inspired by Ravi Shankar and also the Byrds, who also encouraged or inspired George Harrison to pick up the 12 string. Nowhere Man, the vocals on that are just amazing. All the guys singing in sync in that one. Think for Yourself, The Word, Michelle. What Goes On is a great Ringo song. Girl, great vocals by John Lennon. I'm Looking Through You. In My Life, which like a lot of people use for a wedding. And it ends with Run for Your Life, which I always love because it's so dark. And, better run for your life while you can, little girl. Catch you with another man, it's the end, little girl. It's almost like Murderous from John Lennon, which I kind of like because it's different. Not that I want to murder anyone, especially not you girls. Okay, next up is one of the most iconic covers of all time, Abbey Road. This is actually the Beatles' final album. Even though it was released in 69 and Let It Be was released in 70, this was recorded last, so it's technically the Beatles' last ever album. 17 songs on here. Come Together, Something, Oh Darling, Octopus's Garden, Here Comes the Sun, all huge songs. I Want You, She's So Heavy, which is a really, really heavy track. And the guitars just go on and on with that. It's really heavy. They got some distortion on it. And then the second track is just kind of like a medley where all the songs go into each other. And it's amazing. And you just can't pick one song from the second side because it just plays through. And a couple funny things about this album. I'm trying to remember it all. But I know most people watching this probably know the rumor that Paul McCartney was dead in the 60s, they say. And this license plate here says LMW. It's been a while. 28 if. So people thought that stood for Linda McCartney Weeps, 28 if, saying that's how old Paul McCartney would have been had he been alive. This is supposed to be a doppelganger and not the real McCartney, which it's just ridiculous. It's Paul McCartney. It was the whole time. But anyway, George Harrison's dressed as a gravedigger because apparently that's what the gravedigger outfit was. In England, you got buried with no shoes. Ringo is dressed as a pallbearer, I think it is, and I think they say John is the preacher or priest or something like that. I forget. I should have researched before. I just thought of it now to say. But yeah, amazing album, flawless album by the Beatles. And this again, this could be one of the greatest albums of all time. This could be number one on a different day. Just today, I picked something else. Next up is a personal favorite of mine, probably because it has the most songs on a Beatles album, because it's a double album. But it's the self-titled album, which is famously called the White Album. And this is just kind of like Beatles separate compositions, all put on one album. I know they were in the studio at different times. A lot of these songs weren't recorded together. They were, put double tracked and stuff like that. Back in the USSR, Dear Prudence, Glass Onion, Obla Di Obla Da, Wild Honey Pie, The Continuing Story of Bungalow Bill, and then Why My Guitar Gently Weeps, which in my opinion is one of George Harrison's best songs. But a lot of people don't know that the solo on that is actually played by Eric Clapton. But back in the 60s, record companies weren't, giving rights to other artists, so they couldn't say Eric Clapton appears courtesy of, I think it might have been Polydor Records at the time. So that's why he was never listed. Same thing with Billy Preston, the session man, who was on Let It Be, and I believe he may be on a couple songs on Abbey Road. But yeah, that's the first album. Happiness is a Warm Gun, just an amazing song, amazing song. It's kind of like a mini rock opera, in my opinion. The different parts it has to it. Martha, My Dear, great pop song. I'm So Tired, great Lennon song. Blackbird, which is a huge song we all know. Don't Pass Me By, one of my favorite Ringo songs. And the first CD or first album ends with Julia, which is a tribute John Lennon did to his mother. Second track opens with Birthday, which is, it's a good song, but a little too hokey, but guitars on there are great. Your Blues, which is an amazing heavy song. I love Your Blues. One of my favorite songs off this. Then it goes right into Mother Nature's Son, which is an acoustic pop song by Paul McCartney. And then another Sexy City is one of my favorite songs of all time also. But another song off here, which may have been the first heavy metal song, Helter Skelter. And we all know the story of how it inspired Charles Manson and things like that. But a lot of people know this Helter Skelter is actually named for a roller coaster in England. That's where he got the name from. That's what it's about. When I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the side. And they really pushed Ringo during this song. And at the end, that's why you can hear him say, I've got blisters on my fingers. Yeah, there's a different version of Revolution called Revolution No. 1, which is very laid back. And, there's some acoustics in it. And then the only reason I stopped this from going to number 1 is the last two tracks. Revolution No. 9, which is infamous for when you spin it backwards on a turntable, it says, I'm John Lennon. And it does that. I tested it. It does do it. And then the final track, Good Night, which I never liked. Probably my least favorite Beatles song. And, excuse me. Last but not least, this album, probably figured it out by now. Maybe one of the most iconic albums of all time. One of the most influential. A lot of lists name this the best album of all time. And it's Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. Not much I can say about this album, hasn't been said already. The artwork is just amazing. Very psychedelic for the time. This came out in, I believe, June of 1967. Right in the beginning of the Summer of Love. And yeah, you can see a lot of historical figures, especially from the time, like Marilyn Monroe's in there, Edgar Allan Poe, Aleister Crowley, Bob Dylan. I think Lenny Bruce is in there, Mae West. But I don't know if this has it, but I know the vinyl. If you look at the vinyl, there's a list where kind of numbers are. Yeah, here it is. It numbers everyone. It tells you who they are. There's also wax sculpts of the Beatlemania version Beatles, and a little doll that says "Welcome to Rolling Stones." And it's funny that this Beatles album actually came out as a response to the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds, and I think Brian Wilson kind of gave up. That's when he started going in his depression of that, and he asked it when he heard this, because at that point they knew they had no chance of competing versus the Beatles. But yeah, that's my list of the British version of the Beatles albums, ranked from my Again, I don't want to say worse, but best to least best, I'll say. And I'll start. I'll show them again. So we got 13. Coming at 13 is Yellow Submarine. 12 with the Beatles. 11, A Hard Day's Night. 10, Magical Mystery Tour. 9, Please Please Me. 8, Beatles for Sale. 7, Let It Be. 6, Help. 5, Revolver. 4, Rubber Soul. 3 is Abbey Road. 2, The White Album. And 1 is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And like I said, with these 5 albums right here, this could change at any time. You might ask me tomorrow and Rubber Soul might be number 1. Just the perfect albums. That's all I could say. Alright, again, thanks for watching this video. I may do another video doing the US version of the Beatles albums, ranking them that way. Thanks again for watching. Go check out my band page, theelysiumsrock.com, and tune in for more videos. I'll be doing a lot during this quarantine session, and probably once quarantine's over, which hopefully it's over very soon. Everyone stay safe. Thank you.